and Stewardship, Anna Carici. And Anna, have at it.
Thank you, Wendy. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen effectively. So there we go, right? All right, so thank you, Wendy, and thank you everyone for showing up today on this typical spring day. The plants, I'm sure, are happy. So I thought I would start with some updates from our forest restoration site. So the 18-acre upland forest site that is located at the Billy Johnson Mountain Lakes Nature Preserve is clearly budding with life. On the left here, we have a hop hornbeam, bare root leafing out. These photos were taken just last week. In the protective caging here in the middle, we have a viburnum, a nannyberry viburnum, one of our native viburnums, leafing out happily. And this plant will contribute to our understory shrub layer, which provides immediate habitat for birds and other wildlife following the clearing events that were performed prior to planting. And on the right, we have all-time favorite, our lovely bloodroot, spring ephemeral, popping up all over the northeastern slope that was cleared last year. So very excited about that. And let's look on to more signs of life. So again, taken just this past week, I'll mention that in 2020, we did add about almost 3,000 native trees and shrubs to the forest site. And so this is what we're looking at now. In the center is actually our budding American chestnuts. So that's very exciting. They're alive and well, and hopefully they carry on that way. And then I'll mention that in total, we added 52 woody species to the forest site. And again, more evidence of our success. On the left here, we have Amelanchier serviceberry budding out that's going to flower hopefully in the next few weeks. And I like to say with this photo, life begets life. And these ants are most likely mining the honeydew residue of some native aphids or some other plant, insect rather, that is enjoying our new plantings. On the bottom left, we have a very happy elderberry. Top right, St. John's wort, which is really going to help thicket out the understory and provide good habitat. And in the bottom right is our spice bush, tolerant of the deer, and blooming, and grows our specialist, the spice bush swallowtail butterfly. So excited to see all these things going on just a year later. But I thought, why don't we go ahead and take a look at how we got there? So this slide really shows the restoration process for the forest restoration site. Project broke ground in 2018 with the erection of an 8-foot deer exclosure fence. And you can see the project site was infested with many invasive species, multiflora rose, honeysuckle, euonymus. And so after the erection of the fence, we worked very hard to target and remove those invasive plant species. You can see the results of that in the bottom photos and in the right-hand corner. And so the planting phase of the woodies is completed. And as we approach spring, and by summer of this year, we will have completed the entire planting phase with the addition of 5,000 native herbaceous plugs. So wildflowers, grasses, ferns will be added to the understory of the site. As Wendy mentioned, we'll begin planting next week on the weekend of the 17th and 18th, carrying on through Earth Day. If you haven't signed up already, check out the Phobos website and join us. It'll be a lot of fun. Pictured here are some of our full sun-loving more aggressive plants that we'll be adding to the site. So on the left, we have black-eyed Susans. The middle are stretches of milkweed, and on the right, we have our monarch butterfly actually taking nectar from Monarda wild bergamot. On the right, we see our adorable new flags, which help code and indicate where and what plants we'll be adding. And so those have been being laid out, and you will learn more about that if you join us next weekend. And so it's important to mention it's not just me and it's not just the board out there, it's all the volunteers from the Princeton and greater community. This photo series is from our Love Your Park volunteer event, where we spent a lot of time along the driveway entrance of the Mountain Lakes Preserve, clearing invasive species and really promoting the native ones existing. So a lot of spice bush and dogwood. And believe it or not, when I was driving in last week, I saw a patch of bloodroot on the edge of the driveway. So that was nice to see as well. And you can see the piles of everything we've removed over on the right. So thank you, volunteers, and we hope to see you out there. And so as we wrap up the planting phase of the forest restoration site, which is in no way complete in terms of the project, we will continue to manage invasive species, continue to monitor the progress of the site. However, our focus shifts to the adjacent areas of the project site, which are these riparian zones, which Mike is going to talk to us more about in a bit. But this is something that we have been working on in the meantime, and you can see the evidence of that over on the right. So on the left, we have Mountain Lake Preserve map, just really highlighting all the water bodies that pass through the preserve. You see Mountain Brook over on the top left, flowing into Mountain Lake, and it eventually does reach the Stony Brook. We've spent a good amount of effort restoring a wetland area, which is circled in yellow. And the evidence of that is on the right, where you see volunteers removing porcelain berry vines, freeing bladdernut, skunk cabbage, pawpaw, and many other native species that have inhabit and buffer our water systems. And so I just really appreciate this aerial view because it really highlights what the forest restoration site and these other projects do to protect our waterways. On the very left side of, well, in the very center, the wooded area is our forest restoration site. And you can see on the left-hand side that water from the farm area is going to flow through the forest site and then eventually into Mountain Lake, Mountain Brook, and Stony Brook. And so on that note, I will pass it along and thank you guys.
Thank you, Anna. Wonderful report. So now I would like to, oh, Anna, can you stop screen sharing? So thank you. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Michael DeVos. I felt there were two great points to support having Mike be our speaker today. One is that he was recommended by the legendary Dr. Emil DeVito of the New Jersey Conservation Foundation, who always can tell me who are the people who really know about a particular subject. And then when I went to look at the website of the company Michael works for, they had asked staff to answer the question, what is your favorite plant or animal? And Michael chose Quercus alba, the white oak. And since the queen of the forest is also my favorite plant, that kind of sealed the deal. So Michael is an associate designer and a field supervisor with Indigenous Ingenuities, a company in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. And Indigenous Ingenuities describes itself as a company that designs, installs, and maintains habitats that strengthen the connection between people and the environment. with the goal of helping to heal the habitat for all living creatures and using locally sourced materials. Michael also has at least a couple other jobs, but one of them is teaching the third year landscape design class for the Barnes Foundation's horticultural certificate program, which is offered at the Barnes Arboretum of St. Joseph's University. And I was happy to hear from Michael that not only has the pandemic really inspired people to want to get outdoors, but it has inspired them to want to hire this company to heal their particular habitats and make them better for animals and for people. So we're very appreciative of him taking time from an incredibly busy schedule to talk to us about riparian restoration. So with that, I will turn it over to Michael.
Well, thank you very much, Wendy. Give me just a minute or so to get the screen sharing going. I thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And that is our brand new mission statement that you just read. We went through some strategic driving meetings this winter and just came up with that new mission statement.
Well, it's a great one. Michael, we're seeing.
Yep. Give me one second.
Okay, great.
There we go.
Perfect. I will subside.
Well, thank you very much, Wendy. Thank you for that lovely introduction. My name is Michael DeVos, and I think Wendy pretty much told you everything I was going to say possibly about myself. So thank you again for that. And really what we're here to talk about today is some riparian restoration. What I have is a collection of 3 different projects we worked on, all having to do with some form of stream restoration or vernal pool creation here. So we might as well just hop right into it here. Like Wendy said, our business has been growing tremendously. The pandemic, I don't want to say it, but it almost seemed to help our business out. We got a lot more interested people that wanted to fix and clean up their backyards and introduce native plants and do all kinds of stuff. So it's been tremendous. One of the biggest problems we've seen recently in the past couple of years is the storms we've been having. I'm sure you guys have all seen the tremendous amounts of water we get, 2, 3, 4+ inches of storms that come through and kind of destroy stuff. A lot of the work we've been doing in backyards is creating rain gardens and swales. This picture here just represents a swale at the back of a property to keep the water away from the house there and have the water work its way around between 2 different patios that we did there. But I got to tell you, there was probably 6 or 7 of these projects that we did last year in trying to deal with water. A lot of the projects we work with recently have been trying to deal with water problems, not necessarily natural streams or ponds or lakes, but stormwater runoff. So let's jump right into it. The first project I'm going to talk to you guys about is a private backyard in Salisbury, Pennsylvania, where long story short is they had a lot of ash trees. A lot of the ashes were coming down all around the property. They hired us to come in and do some clearing. And so there was piles and piles of logs all around this property. But yet right along the stream, there was one oak tree. Tons of ash, a lot of Norway maple, not really good stuff out there, but one oak that was just about ready to fall over because the stream was eating away at it. And the client really wanted to save this oak. And I thought we came up with a pretty good solution on how to save this oak tree. So what you're seeing there in those first 2 pictures is every stream work we do, we're trying to lower the sediment that's running downstream. So hay bales in the stream right there, silt fence across the stream in some options. Hay bales seem to work the best because we can move to them, add them, move them around, add to it. And they're just a lot easier to get in the stream there. We don't have to dig like you would for a silt fence. That other picture is just an example of the ash that were falling all around the property. So we had access back and forth across the stream there. Here's the beginning of the project, and you'll see the tree in detail a little bit later on, but you can see the roots there completely undermined. That hole in that stream went back probably 3 to 4 feet underneath this tree. And really that tree in the next couple storms was probably going to fall over. So they asked us to try to prop it up and save it as best we could. So what we're trying to do here is what I would call a woody debris, an in-stream woody debris pile. And what we did was started to form these giant toothpicks of logs and anchor them into the ground. We were trying to work them between the roots, into the roots, anywhere we could fit these in. There's no rhyme or reason to this method. It's just where they fit the best, however you can get them in, however they can start weaving things together here. And you can see we formed these giant toothpicks, lifted them up with a machine, slammed them in with the machine, used the machine to tamp them in as tight as we could. There's bedrock in portions of this stream, so we were very limited as to how deep we could get some of these logs into the stream. Here we are carrying them over to the edge of the stream. I also want you to notice we try to be as gentle on the land as possible in cases here. So we're trying to use ground mats as much as we can. The ground mats are also for typical landscape work people using to get in the backyards to plant without making too much of a mess, whether you're using a wheelbarrow or a machine. Here we were trying to protect the roots and just kind of ease the ground pressure there all along the edge of the stream as we were working our way in there. There you can see the oak tree. This is a good picture of the oak in question right there at the far right of the screen. So all the major bigger pieces we had slammed in the ground there, they were all probably in, I want to say anywhere from 1 foot to 3 feet in the ground, depending on how deep we can get them. Like, again, like I said, there was no rhyme or reason. If they went deep, we'd keep hammering them in. If they stopped and hit bedrock, we stopped. What you see laying down on the bottom now are logs that we threw in there that we're now also trying to wedge in. So we got into the stream there and started trying to angle those pieces in. And what we're trying to do is just make a patchwork, a knitwork of logs so that the debris will pile up in there. The long-term goal of this situation here is to try to get debris to stay in those spots there. And you'll see as we work through these pictures, we put smaller and smaller and smaller material in it. So every time a storm comes, material gets stuck in there, leaves, sticks, debris, sediment builds up back in this bank right here and hopefully restores some of that grade. Everything we used here was all from the site. We didn't bring anything in except for a machine and chainsaw, and that did all of our work out here. So, you know, I love projects like this where we can say we didn't bring anything to the site but ourselves and our equipment to do the jobs. You know, the fact it stinks that they had to cut down all these ash trees, but here we are making use of the ash trees in question. So again, they're just laying there, and we got into the stream there and started packing those in and twisting. All those logs got twisted into those roots and tried to wedge between all the other logs themselves there. That was us just throwing them over the edge there so the guys could get in the creek to start placing them. There were some rocks. We did put a couple rocks at the base because there were some rocks that we could move around there. So we were able to place a few boulders down at the bottom once we got that second layer of sticks inside the mess there. There's us placing some boulders in there, and you can see the bigger logs there. And again, no rhyme or reason. That log that's sticking out into the creek, that's as far as that would go. That's fine. That's going to collect sediment there. The more fingers and the more braids we have working out into the stream, the better it's going to be. The more things it's going to catch there. Where we put the rocks, we tried to put the rocks where the most force was. So if you're looking at that picture on the right, those 3 boulders were placed there because that's facing right upstream. So that would deflect the majority of the water coming downstream. And here we're getting to somewhat of a finished product here. All those medium-sized logs that you guys saw in the creeks, that all got wedged in there. Boulders were placed at the bottom, and all the material, the entire tree, the branches, the sticks, the twigs, everything all got used here. So we started cutting down smaller branches and just sticking them in. We stood in that creek for a few hours just sticking in branches as deep as they would go into there. And the idea is that those are the fingers that are going to catch the debris. I want to say that's close to a finished product there. I have a few more pictures to show you how we took the rest of our landscaping ideas to a step further with this client here. But as far as the stream restoration portion of this job goes, all those stumps you see up top, we cut those level just to make it look a little bit neater up there. But every one of those stumps on top are 8-10 foot posts pounded into the ground there. Even those big ones you see facing you in the picture, we laid logs between those uprights. There were large logs laid and twisted between them, again, to also help knit and tie it all together. And then you can see how much woody debris was pushed in there. The one kind of, it's not funny. This stream got tested 3 hours after we did it. So that last little bit of woody debris that you see in that picture, the real fine sticks, we're not there the day before. This was like, I want to say a 3-day project. And on the second day, we were mostly done with the exception of putting in all that small sticky material. And that night, Solebury, Pennsylvania got 3.5 inches of rain, and this stream completely flooded. The whole backyard that you see level behind this area was all underwater the day we left this job site. And I was a little nervous what I was going to come to the next day. And needless to say, we showed up and pretty much nothing moved. If you can tell, the boulders underneath are all already chock full of sediment, and that sediment pile in the middle of the stream, none of that was there when we left that night. And it poured and rained like crazy that night. We went back the next day, the stream was down looking like this. We shoved all the sticks in and walked away happy that we knew it was gonna work after that day. But it's not very often things get put to the test when you're 80% done with the project.
So, Mike, there's a question in the chat.
Okay.
Was anything done upstream to control velocity?
No, it just runs through people's private backyards. So no, there was really nothing done at all. No check dams, nothing at all done like that. So I just want to quick show you a few more pictures of the final product here. These clients asked for a little bit more work to be done, and there's just a top picture of what we just looked at. Another top picture there. The one large stump was an ash tree that was there, so that was just cut and left there. And you can see the oak in question, why we wanted to save that oak, because it was pretty much the only one on the site. So then we put a bench in there, which I thought was pretty cool. We took more of that ash that was on site, used a little mill that we have for our chainsaws, and created a bench there that we screwed and fastened to those posts there. So there was a nice place to sit. And then we put some more logs there and a table there, and really made a nice little space out of this area there for the clients to go sit down and enjoy the creek. Here we are on to the second project. Again, this is a private residence out in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, I want to say. This was a fish hatchery. So back in the late 40s, early 50s, this was a man-made constructed fish habitat. I believe they were probably doing trout for the Wissahickon. This is very close to Friends of the Wissahickon property there. They have a large section there up in Ambler and in that region. So this was broken into 3 sections, and the original idea was that there were 3 separate tanks there with a natural spring that flowed through it and then ultimately dumped into the Wissahickon. They constructed concrete walls, concrete floor, and 3 stone walls to kind of hold back areas so that they could make little fish habitats. These were probably 3-ish feet, 30 inches deep, running through this backyard. And the client, who we've done a lot of work for previously, asked us, what do we do back there? What do we do? And our idea was to kind of just rehab it, kind of turn it back into a stream that was working. And he wanted to get one section that was deep enough that he could go back into it and, and at least walk around in some cool water, because it is natural flowing spring water. And Wendy, you'll appreciate that those 2 big trees in the background there at the top of this are giant white oaks that are
Lovely.
there. So this was more of yes, it was a restoration because there was a lot of invasives and there was a lot of junk in there and sediment that had to be dealt with. But this was just kind of prettying up a backyard that was a wetland there. Cold water flowed through this all summer long. So this picture is obviously the beginning. You can see the wall of the edge of the fish hatchery there and all the invasives and just junk that was filling back into it. There's a handful of good things, and you'll see some of them, but mostly all junk in there. And we also wanted to do as little disturbance as possible. So we weren't going to pull out all the existing walls. A lot of the concrete that was there was just left, and we worked with, and you'll see that as we go through here a little bit. Nothing was really destroyed. We just kind of opened it back up and tried to get it back to a meandering stream again. This is just looking down at it, hard to tell, but you can see all the invasives down there. The ferns and probably the jewelweed were really the only herbaceous things on that ground cover layer that were worth anything. A lot of stiltgrass, a lot of wisteria, a lot of honeysuckle, multiflora, just not a good spot. Again, right back to what I said before, erosion sediment control is huge for us. So, step 1, before we start digging into anything, digging anywhere whatsoever, we're going to do some sediment control. Here we did it in, I think, 3 locations. I think I'm only showing you one here, but because it was such a big area here, I think we put hay bales in 3 different areas to help collect sediment. And if you can kind of tell in this next slide, the water's muddy in front of it, and behind it, it's really not. There's really no trickle there, but you could tell on this site where we kept the hay bales in place, you had dirty, muddy water on one side and clean water pumping out on the other side. Here's an example of one of the existing stone walls in there. So you can get a sense it was about 12 feet wide and about 24, 30 inches deep. And there were 3 walls like that. The area above in this picture where you see the mud, this lower section here and another one were the 3 basins that they were growing the fish in. So in this case, we were trying to just restore this wall. This one wasn't in that bad a shape. We patched some of the holes on it. And we used some bentonite at the back of this thing to hold it. We noticed it was leaking out the bottom there. So we cemented the edges a little bit better, and then we used a bunch of bentonite that held back a lot of the little tiny holes in this wall, and then pushed all the soil back up against it. Reworked the top a little bit to get the water to flow where we wanted it, but just a little bit of slight rehab on what was an existing wall in this creek here. I know it's a fuzzy picture, but you can kind of see we used the wall. Like I said before, we didn't want to take anything out of there and really destroy much and make more of a mess than we had to. So we left the concrete wall, even though it was leaning and pitching a little bit, it was solid, done back in the 50s when concrete was poured right. And that, I can't even imagine how much cement, how many truckloads that would have been if we had to get that out of there. Concrete floor still existing in that. And then on the other side, you can see we were starting to grade and form out a natural stream bank. And you'll see as we go deeper into this with boulders and plants, how we got to that point. That picture is also a good example of the one good shrub. I believe that's Viburnum trilobum, cranberry bush viburnum down there in front of that pine tree. Really one of the very few shrubs, good shrubs that we found throughout that site. For efficiency reasons, we brought a lot of the material right to the site. This was delivered. We had 2 tractor trailer loads worth of boulders and stones delivered right to the site right there. So this is out in the roadway, and we came, picked them right up and brought them right down to the site. Again, it kind of goes to our philosophy. We try to use smaller equipment, smaller machines, smaller trucks. All of our vehicles are kind of a smaller fleet. The more we can have this stuff delivered to site, and we're not trucking and moving stuff, we just trying to keep that envelope as small as possible. And this is just one little step in the process. If we had to get all those boulders delivered to our site and then truck them 6-7 loads worth of it over there, how much fuel we're using, how much time are we taking up? And it's, yes, it's a monetary thing for the company, but it's also, we look at it as somewhat of an environmental aspect, trying to save on, you know, all that fuel. So here's us starting to place some of those boulders in there. I think what you're looking at is that wall that we just showed trying to repair there. There's roots from that tulip poplar coming out into there. That's what you see in the front. And then there we are starting to place some of those bigger boulders, one on this side on the concrete wall, and also reaching over, you can see the other side, we're starting to place some boulders in there to retain that grade. I don't think I have a great final picture of this, but we also made kind of a stepping stone pathway through the creek here. So those stones are probably only 4 or 5 inches thick right there. But we also got a couple that were like a foot 18 inches thick. So there were 2 more stones placed in the center of that wet spot right there. So the wet spot would go between the stones there. There was like 3 streams broken between the stones. And there was a hopscotch stone pathway that could get you to both sides of the stream to connect a little trail system. And I'll show you some other pictures in a minute that has there's a spot lower down too where you could step through the creek on some boulders. One of the walls was completely destroyed and broken apart. So this is the area from this wall up to that existing stone wall I showed you is the one spot where we were trying to kind of make a basin again and actually have standing water, kind of like a small pond in the backyard. So here we are recreating a new wall there, cement block filled and natural stone face. What I'd say about that natural stone is there was a spring house approximately 100 yards away from where we were here. So we were able to take a spring house that had been falling apart. It was just a pile of rubble. All the stones we used, not the big boulders you saw, but all the stones everywhere else, all came from that spring house. So again, not moving stuff around, using a local source and local material from site is is really how we're trying to do things as best we can. And you see some of the bigger boulders that we anchored in there to tie the wall into. Now here you are looking back upstream here. So you can see that middle section. The upper section, we were just trying to create a stream. The middle section is where we wanted to have somewhat some open water and kind of a pond in there. And then below that, it was a stream again. This whole thing is lined with concrete. There's a concrete floor running underneath the entire thing here. So again, did not want to destroy that. Poked holes through it so things would drain better and work better, but did not want to get rid of it all. And here again, you can also see all the boulder placement that we did up and down the stream to kind of get that natural feel back to it. Here's putting some of those boulders in place. Sometimes we use an excavator, sometimes we use this guy when the stones are a little bit bigger. Again, you see another one of those sediment control hay bale sets. This was down at the far end of this stream. And here we are starting to plant. We hadn't filled it in. We were also using pumps to pump around this section while we didn't want it to fill in before we planted. What I think you're looking at there is probably Cephalanthus buttonbush down in the water, plethora up above there. There's blue flag iris, Carrick stricta, Juncus effusius, typical wetland plants there. You can see the trays of plugs just sitting in the water waiting to be planted. And then the pots obviously laid out all the shrubs and started getting those things in the ground. Couple more pictures of planting here. And you can also see that we use jute netting here. Where we were shaping all that wet soil was on top of those concrete floors. So it really had a chance, it could really slough if we got a bad rainstorm. So the section up top that we were trying to do, recreate as a stream, and this lower section, we used jute net as much as we could there. Also in the middle of that picture, you'll notice that's the other way to cross the stream there. It's hard to tell, but there is a big flat rock in the middle of the stream there, and then some boulders on either side of it. So you can, I think this client had three little girls that like to run around and play in the creek. So there was a way for them to loop around the formal stone steps up top. They could run through the woods and then pop out here and cross the creek as well too. Previous to this, there, it was no man's land. It was sticker bush heaven, and they couldn't really get out there at all. Also got some plants delivered to this site. I think the picture on your left, the monarch itself, is probably just a stock picture we had in there. But we did get these swamp milkweeds delivered to the site, and it came with a passenger that we were very happy to move along. Here again, this is that same little hopscotch area right there across the creek there. Some of the plants in here you'll see, there's sensitive fern, juncus, blue flag iris, chorus, sweet flag, pickle rush was used in here a lot, fox sedge was used in here a lot. I think we used some mimulus, monkey flower, scutellaria, and there was a bunch of lobelia. There was both red and blue lobelia used throughout this garden in here. Again, some great pictures of planting there up and down. We use leaf mulch. I'll touch on this quickly. What you see on top there, spilling into that jute netting, is leaf mulch. We don't use any processed mulch, dyed mulches here whatsoever. No matter what kind of garden we're doing, wherever we're doing it, it's leaf mulch. It's the only thing we use for our gardens. And it is just leaves, went through a chipper, ground up, and given back to us. Nothing added to it, nothing, no chemicals, no paints, no additives, no nothing, just ground up leaves. And if you think about it, the best mulch in the world is that forest floor out there. And all we're trying to do is replicate that in gardens and natural areas, obviously. And you can see we're working on the wall. The other picture there is us just trying to finish up that wall and get the spillover set. You can look back and see the concrete wall on the one side and then the more natural recreated stream bank on the other side. There's the final filling up. We kind of turn the pumps off and let that center fill up there. So there you can tell that's that center section right there that's approximately 24, 30 inches deep of water with a stream, meandering stream below it. That's our new spillover right there that we built into it. You'll notice the stones in the bottom protruding out of the wall, and that's to kind of break up the flow of the water. So when the water really is flowing over that, it's got something to hit there and kind of break it up. If not, it would kind of make a big, deep depression underneath there. There was still concrete floor here, but we really wanted to break this up just so that it wasn't as forceful coming out over this. And again, all those stones, with the exception of the flat one in the middle, all those other stones were all right out of the spring house. You can tell those are old hand chiseled stones from probably early 1800s. It was some beautiful stone to work with. Looking back upstream again here, the water had gone down. This was a little bit later on after we had finished, I believe. Okay, that was the end of that site. For some reason, this picture showed up a little funky. I tried to put the whole map in of the plan of the Great Swamp. This is a project we did last fall that I'm really happy about. Emil brought us in with his lovely wife to do some restoration work with the Great Swamp Watershed Association. So this is not the national park. This is the area that's closer to 287, and the property is owned by the Great Swamp Watershed Association and the Harding Land Trust, I believe. And the goal for this project was for us to go in and create a bunch of vernal pools, enlarge some of the vernal pools that were already existing, make some new vernal pools in there, fill in ditches, which I'll explain to you in a minute, and also do some stream restoration. And now this stream restoration was slightly different because what we were trying to do, if anybody's familiar with the old stories way back when of the Great Swamp, they tried to drain the swamp. Everybody heard that one recently? Originally, Newark Airport was going to be put in Morristown in the Great Swamp. So they said they're going to go drain the swamp to put an airport in there. They went in and they dug straight line trenches. And if you can kind of tell by this map, you can see some of these lines. Those blue lines are perfectly straight in some sections. So what they did was to natural creeks and created new ditches and tried to make these straight line trenches to drain out the water out of the swamp. Kind of stupid, but you know, here we are 60 years later trying to fix all that. So all the work that we were doing there, we were digging vernal pools, creating soil, but we were taking that soil and putting in what they call ditch plugs. If you look at the plan, you can see there's big black marks in some of the blue areas. That was us putting plugs. Basically, the soil that we excavated out from the vernal pools went into these ditch plugs, which plugged up some of these trenches. So to try to keep as much water on the site as possible, let the swamp be the swamp, and you know, let nature do its thing out there. Why are you not working? Huh. I am unable to switch slides right now. Okay, let me try it this way. Okay, just a sign of the Great Swamp. That's the entrance to the trail work right there. And here you go. This is one of those straight line ditches you can see right here. That's their little shed where they start their volunteer days and work from. And that little bridge goes over one of these straight line trenches. This is not a natural stream. This isn't two of the streams that run through the site. This was just a dug channel to try to get water out of the swamp right here. So in these next pictures here, you'll see this was us creating vernal pools in here. So we were going into areas and going down roughly 18 inches in some spots. And all the soil we were taking out of these sites were going into those ditch plugs there to kind of plug up the trenches there to keep all the water on site. And interesting enough, I just drove by this. Part of this vernal pool in particular, you can actually see from Route 287. If you're in the right-hand lane, just past the exit where the rest area is on 287, and you look off into the woods, you'll see a lot of standing water right now, black standing water in the swamp. And that is this exact vernal pool you're looking at right here. So really, again, like I stated before, this is one of those projects where we went in with labor and 2 machines and did all the work we needed to do without bringing things. We brought seed into this job, but that was it on this project here. It's a lot of machine work. We used a lot of ground mats, a lot of protection in the forest here, but it was really just about moving soil in here. Ultimately, these vernal pools, where there were good trees, we saved them. Probably red maple there in the center. You know, we kind of played around with where to make these and how to make them based on what was doing there. If there was already some dead fallen trees, we kind of dug around them. Where we found good native vegetation, we worked, you know, side by side with them. Where we found a lot of the areas where we dug the vernal pools was all multiflora rose. So we were happy to go into these areas, rip all the rows out and create the vernal pool. We found areas that were full of clethra. We found areas that were full of winterberry. And obviously where they were, we didn't rip into those. We kind of left them the way they were. There were specific sites where they wanted these vernal pools, but we had kind of leeway to play around with where to actually dig them, how big to dig them, and where we wanted to go with it. With Hazel's help, obviously running through all this. You also see in that picture, there's mounds in there. The idea for this was they're meant to be rough. These are not perfect, smooth measuring out there with transits. The idea is that there's pockets of water held in there, there's lumps of soil. We wanted that variation of grade elevations there from underwater, water line to above water right there. Ultimately, all these vernal pools got seeded last fall before we got out of there. A cover crop was put in just because that was what was going to germinate over the winter to hold the ground. And then a basin mix was thrown, seed mix that was for wetland basins was used throughout the whole floor. And then a rain garden / wetland mix was used on the high spots and the berms all around it. So everything that we disturbed all got reseeded before we left out of there. And by the time we left in early November, the cover crop had germinated. And hopefully this stuff will all start germinating this year. All the seed we put in there will start germinating this year. This is one of the ones we dug right here. You can see one of my employees there, he's actually walking on a boardwalk there, but in some cases we did too good of a job and they had to come back and fix their boardwalk system in certain places because we kind of flooded the spots too much. Nothing was too much, but there was a couple of repairs they had to do and new sections of boardwalk they had to put in. They knew that was going to happen. They knew we were going to make the site wetter. Some cases we did not expect some of these to be as large as they did, and it was really interesting to see because we saw them fill up right as we finished the project. It started raining. This was one we really kind of played the weather by. We were really looking at the weather to try to get in here on dry days before the storms came in the fall. So most of this work got done, I want to say late September, early October last year. And then we went back in to do, which I'm going to show you in a minute, is all the stream work in there. And it had already started pouring at that point, and all the vernal pools were filled in and flooded. And if we hadn't done it that way, I don't think we would have gotten that job done in the fall. We also found some lovely treats while we were out there. That is one of the biggest chicken of the woods mushrooms I've ever come across in my entire life. It was about 12 feet up a tree. We saw that as we were coming out of the woods one day, and I could not resist on bringing that home with me. I think 10 people were eating chicken of the woods for the next week after that. It was, you can tell by me up there holding it, that thing was massive, absolutely massive. I ate that for a week and a half straight, I think. Again, here's those vernal pools. I think if you zoom in very closely, you can kind of see the cover crop starting in here. And this is ideally what we were doing. And you can see where we left good trees. There were other trees in the area that got taken down, and some of those were taken down for the work I'm going to show you in a minute, the stream work. And other ones were, you know, in an area where there was 500 little red maple saplings, it's not a big deal if we take out 10, 15 of those red maple saplings. If we found nicer oak trees or quality plants in certain areas, we obviously stayed away from. But you know, there were some cases where we absolutely cut down native vegetation to create these areas, but we were pretty selective as to where we went. So that's the vernal pool creation. So all those, I want to say there was 12 vernal pools created between the Harding Land Trust and the Great Swamp Watershed Association, little headquarters there on Tiger Lily Lane. All throughout the woods there's 12 new vernal pools created, all been seeded. Hopefully the goal is that the Watershed Association, obviously if things change for COVID this summer, their idea is to come back in there with corporate volunteer groups this summer and do some live planting with plugs and shrubs from Pinelands Nursery throughout all the vernal pool areas right there. So their idea is to come in with, you know, trays of lobelia and juncus and carex and a couple other wetland species, and then also do some shrub material on the perimeters, on the bumps and high spots in the perimeters of the vernal pools as well. So hopefully that'll get done this year, and that would close off that project for them.
So Mike, before you move on, there's one question from Steve Hiltner about vernal pools.
Great, go ahead.
And that is a while back, I think it was proposed that vernal pools be built at mountain lakes, and the state refused to allow it. How do you get permits to do this work?
We did need DEP permits for this work. I was not in charge of doing that. This is a project that was green lighted, I want to say 12 years ago. I looked at this project 7 or 8 years ago when I was at a different organization. They've been trying to do this work for years and years and years, and finally all the funding and everything came together for it. So I specifically don't know as far as the permitting goes for this because I was not involved with it. You would have to ask the Great Swamp Watershed Association where they were at with that. But I do know that this is a 12-year-old project that finally got done in 2020. And it's surprising why the state wouldn't allow you to create vernal pools, especially if you're coming across areas. You know, I saw the pictures of the site there from the view, and you know, if there's areas with invasives in it, or you know, areas that could be cleared and fixed, why they wouldn't allow you to do that is interesting. So that was the vernal pool creation. The next portion of this project was a stream restoration, but it's slightly different than the other ones I showed you. You know, the other ones we were trying to fix the banks and hold the banks from eroding. Here we're actually trying to make banks erode, because what we wanted to do, even in some of the two natural streams that went through here, I believe one is Silverbrook, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but there are two natural streams that run through this piece of property. And what we wanted to do, they also straightened those out to get the water out faster. So the idea here was we were also trying to get those streams to be serpentine again and try to make them move. So not only did we do in-stream debris like I showed you before, in a lot of these situations we had logs that were jutting out into the stream that would hopefully force the water to the other bank. And here you can see this next picture. So what we did, instead, where we found an eroded bank, we actually anchored the opposite bank. So if you're looking at this picture right here, you can see that the side on the right was already starting to get eroded. A lot of invasives up top of there, nothing really good above that. That was already starting to get eroded. So our idea here was to anchor and bolster the other side of the creek so that it would actually force the water to where it's eroding and start those serpentines. You know, we want some sediment here. We want some of this to fall around and move around. The idea was to come back, you know, 100 years ago, these streams were barely moving and curved all over the place. And then we went in with machines back in the 40s and 50s and tried to straighten everything out. So the main goal here was to get them to move again. And we knew that involved, you know, letting the stream do its thing. And if it was going to dig into that bank 10 feet, that's kind of what we wanted it to do there. Here's an example, looking kind of down on it, same thing. I'm standing on a slope that's full of multiflora, honeysuckle, really nasty stuff right there. Hard to tell in this pictures, I got some better pictures, but underneath all that woody debris, there's also logs laying horizontal in the stream that are pushing the water to the left in this picture. So again, we're bolstering that bank, restoring that bank on that right-hand side to hopefully open up and eat into this other side of the bank right there. So in some sections, what we did was we alternated. There was 100 foot of this, of a bank restoration, 100 foot of nothing, and then 100 foot of a bank restoration on the other side. So that the idea was to get the stream to start moving again. In one case, we actually had a downed tree that we used to our advantage here. So you can see, I think this is the Harding Land Trust property there, a little bridge over the creek back there. Again, look at the backdrop, you'll see our sediment control there. We knew we were going to do some digging into the creek here. Had hay bales set up, I believe, in 3 locations down the stream there. So this tree had already kind of fell over on its own, blocked up the stream, was already causing a little bit of a problem there. So we looked at that and decided to make the stream go around the tree. There's us filling back in front of the log on the front side there. That's the same thing. Throwing logs in, we were just tossing logs in there because, again, what we did was we bolstered the other side. So now that we've made a curve, and you'll see this in a minute, once we've made this curve around the tree, we're using logs put on the other side of the bank to kind of protect the other bank from falling down. Again, our sediment control, and you can see the tree, that's that big tree up at the top of this picture up there. And there's what we were creating, trying to get that stream to go around that tree there. The logs were behind that. The person you see in that picture, those logs were used on the other side. So when the stream came around this corner here, it hit a wooden debris pile on the other side and didn't eat away at that bank because we've already created the curve here. We didn't want it to go any farther. There's it starting to flow. We dammed it up and pumped it around and then ultimately dug it out and let it go. Started doing some anchoring. There was also more anchoring that went into that right there on the inside to keep that channel from falling apart. Now that was all loose soil, we really anchored that with a bunch of logs and poked the same way we did that other job there before. We were hammering posts in the ground. A lot of those smaller rounds that you see cut in that picture, we create those with chainsaws, and people get in the creek there with hammers and sledgehammers and just pound those things in. Here again, that same idea here. We're anchoring this side of the bank. So we laid a bunch of long linear logs there and then used spikes, wooden spikes from these tree branches to kind of hold everything in place right there. Again, underneath these logs, and it's hard to tell in any of the pictures we have because there's the first layer are roughly 4 to 6 foot pieces of logs that are angled 45 degrees. If you can kind of, let's see, can you see my cursor? No. The underwater, there's pieces of logs at 45 degrees so that as the stream comes in, it forces the stream to go to that other side of the bank there to start eating it out. This is how we moved some of the logs around. Some of it, obviously, we could carry into place. Other ones we had to lift up and move around with the machines in there, lift them to the other sides of the banks. There's this is the best picture I have. If you can look at that picture on the right there, you can see the log that's horizontal in the water with stakes holding it in place right there. Those are the ones that were meant to force the water to the other side of the creek. The horizontal logs and all the sticky branches are just like the other job I showed you. We're trying to hold debris there. But these other logs that were laying in the stream with anchors, those are what we're trying to force the creek to the other side to start eating away at the bank. And both of us, the picture on the left's a little rough. I think it's sideways, but you can see the logs laying in the stream. The picture on the right shows it a little bit better of our woody, sticky debris on the bank, and then our 45-degree angled logs that go all the way under the bank, under those big logs, and that's what forces the water across the stream. A lot of white oak pictures. Here's another fantastic white oak picture that I found just roaming through these woods. There were some extremely old oaks, pin oaks, white oaks, and beech trees. In one section of this forest, there were just massive trees in there. Great forest floor, some tremendous hiking in there. And we also came across a giant, like 3 foot wide snapping turtle one day, kind of crawled out of the swamp when we were in there. And he was a beast. He didn't want anything to do with us, but that was as close as I could get with our camera right there to him. And that's all I have. I end this the same way I started this. This is another project we did, but here was a backyard that was kind of in a wetland and they were having water issues up against the house. We created 2 rain gardens and a swale all the way surrounding almost this entire property to get the water to drain away from this backyard right here. This was right during a storm. We went out and took these pictures right here. But all that grading and everything you see in there is all brand new. The water used to all just sheet right towards the house. They had puddles and problems and floods in the first floor of the house here. And we've had 3 or 4 significant rainstorms since this project happened, and it's all holding up pretty good. But there's a swale now that starts on the side of the property under a walkway to a rain garden in the front yard. In the middle there, right above the dog, there's a small rain garden right there. Comes under our bridge, there's another rain garden farther down the line, and then it bleeds off into the woods out there. But all the water gets caught and stays there and goes out where it can sit in the woods and drain and doesn't go into this house right here. So like I said, we've been dealing with water a lot, and through these past couple of years, the storms we've been getting, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And even if it's a landscape project or a patio project like this one was, the biggest emphasis, the biggest goal of this project was to deal with the water. I have overflow pumps. It's the first time I've ever done a sump pump. In this patio you're looking at has a sump pump underneath it, so that if this goes over, the sump pump will pump the water to the front rain garden. I've never put a sump pump in a patio before. First time for everything. But you know, it was needed. One of the storms we had last fall, that one tornado / 4 or 5 inches of rainstorm we had in early September last year, the whole place was flooded. That's why the sump pump went in. On that note, I thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to hang out here for as long as possible. If everybody's got questions or wants to chat about anything, happy to. You see our information right there. Based on Wendy's introduction, I see she's perused our website there and got all the dirt on all of us. It's funny, we have pictures of all our employees on our website, and I don't understand computers, but I know there's a way for us to see what's the most viewed thing on our website. And it's not the jobs and it's not the work, it's the pictures of the people that work here.
Well,
And
that was great, Mike. Thank you very much.
And thank you all very much.
We do have a question actually from Anna Carici. Anna, do you want to just ask the question out loud?
Sure. So the forest restoration site in much of Mountain Lakes Preserve has a lot of ash canopy. And as many of us know, the ashes are succumbing to the emerald ash borer and dying, many being removed and such. But I noticed, so it's interesting in the forest restoration site because you typically expect the canopy to close. And I sense we're going to be witnessing even more open canopy. But with these falling and dying ash trees, I notice these vernal-like pools that form at the base. And I wonder if you have experience with promoting those. I don't think it's so easy for us to bring in machinery into the 75-acre preserved park, but we will be planting the edges of these areas and hoping to promote whatever life they can provide. And I wonder if you have any more. It's kind of an interesting life from death.
Yeah.
Transition.
I've seen that in the past before. A lot of times in an old forest, an old growth forest too, you'll see all the wet spots are, even if they're rotted away, it was where a stump fell over. So I don't see any reason why you wouldn't go there and enlarge them, make them bigger, make them deeper, plant them. There's no reason not to do that there. My only question that I would say to you is if it's heavily traveled areas, I'd be cautious and try to maybe deal with some of the ash problems before they start falling on people there. And that's kind of what we've done. I've worked on some properties where we've had to deal with a lot of ash, but it's close to roadways, residences, houses, structures, barns, where they're deep in the woods where nobody's going. Sure, let them fall on their own, let them do their thing. But if you plan on using some of that wood in a restoration project, like anything we talked about today, you'd want to get it sooner than later while it's still pretty much a hardwood, because it will decay pretty quickly. But I love the idea of where you have those big fallovers, oak, ash, whatever tree, where those big stumps have uprooted, those are perfect vernal pools. And there was a job with Friends of the Wissahickon I did at my previous job, I want to say 6-7 years ago, where we did exactly that. We did bring machines in, but some of those areas we enlarged exactly where there was a pool already, where there was a down tree, where there was a big stump that was already created a vernal pool. We were just making them bigger and better. That's all. Maybe not better, but bigger. To
piggyback off that, is there a certain size that is ideal from,
it's more of depth, I think, because you do want them to kind of dry out in the summertime. You don't want them to hold water all year round. So we were, some of the plans we had for the Great Swamp kind of showed us at 12 to 16 inches deep, and not really trying to go much deeper than that. What I would say as far as size goes, the bigger in some cases, if you have the opportunity. I mean, just think about the amphibians that are going to use that space there. It's tremendous. The peepers, the frogs, the toads, the salamanders, everything's going to start using that.
And that is my experience. When you walk up to the edge, you scare a bunch of little frogs and stuff away. Is there anything so I had heard recently about maybe surveying for egg masses or things in those vernal pools? Is that something you guys?
They did do some research, and they basically told us that September, October was the best. We actually had biologists from NRCS came into the Great Swamp and explained to us, we were trying to avoid migrating bats and red-eared slider turtles out there. That's when I think they go in to bury in the ground in November. So we needed to be done with all the vernal pool work in September and October this year to avoid turtles and other things getting into the ground. We needed to be out of those areas by November, so that the amphibians, the salamanders, and the turtles and everything could bury themselves in the mud, and we wouldn't be disturbing them.
Mike, we have a question from one of Anna's predecessors as our natural resource manager, Steve Hiltner. And, he mentions that there was a local project actually done by the university, a stream restoration, but it wasn't maintained. He indicates, I'm not familiar with this particular issue, But he says, so the stream, you know, abandoned the intended channel and moved somewhere else. And wondering about maintenance funding being built into stream
Maintenance
restoration
in
projects.
every single project you do, whether it's a landscape, whether it's a restoration, a meadow, you cannot, if you're going to do something, maintenance is the most important piece of that puzzle. If you're putting out invasives or trying to change from an invasive area, whether it be a meadow, a field, a woods, a stream, whatever, maintenance is what is needed. And nobody wants to pay for that. No one wants to fund that. But that is the most important piece of the puzzle right there. If nothing's maintained after we do all this work, why do all the work? And we kind of preach that, and kind of what we do at Indigenous here is we have a full-time 2 crews that go out and just do maintenance of our gardens, of our installations. We don't guarantee plants unless we're doing the maintenance. We have a whole kind of holistic approach of the way we do maintenance. We are not your typical landscape company that does maintenance. We have a mulching grinding mower that we actually run through your garden beds and kind of leave all the debris right there in your garden. So if you have a big giant perennial garden, we're crushing all that material up and leaving it as your mulch that year. We're putting the seeds back into the ground. We're using the debris that's there. We're not bringing in mulch every year. We also have a little bike service that goes into town. We have an electric bike, an electric mower, electric bike with a trailer that has a mower, blower, and weed whacker on it, all electric powered, and it goes throughout the town of Doylestown in the borough to do our maintenance. But anything, especially restoration, I saw the pictures, Anna, where you did the restoration of the woods and started putting stuff in there. If you don't keep the invasives off those cages and off those trees, every good thing you just planted is going to be engulfed in honeysuckle and multiflora, and you name it, will be creeping and crawling all over it. So I cannot stress enough how important maintenance is. And every single type of project you're thinking about doing in nature, maintenance is key. Maintenance is key.
Yeah, we do anticipate having to keep at those things you just mentioned. And as Anna said earlier, just getting the plants in the ground is by no means the end of the project.
Just the beginning. It's just the beginning.
Yeah, appreciate your saying that. Now there's one other question here. I don't think it's particularly directed to you, Mike, but you may have some thoughts. This person mentions that he runs a lot at Mountain Lakes Preserve and sees a pine grove where most of the pines have died over the last few years and some have been cut down. What happened to kill all those pines? I do know that a lot of pines have come down in areas adjacent to mountain lakes in sort of mini bursts in some of the big storms that we had. But I'm not sure that's what this refers to. I don't know, is there this person is saying they died. Is there a pine problem that you've encountered?
No. Pines are very weak wooded. So you do see a lot of branches coming out of pine trees. And sometimes they may look dead, but if you look at the very tippy top of pine trees, usually there's a big tuft of green, especially in a forest. They end up losing. What you're looking at in this last picture here, those trees on the left are pine trees, and there's no green until you get up 20, 30 feet up there. So a lot of times pines do in a forest lose all their lower branches, and it's just a little tough to top. Very typical for giant branches to be coming out of white pines. They're a very weak wooded tree. Nothing I would use near a house.
Hey,
I have a question. This is Anna Reed-Lyles. And I am, walking around and exploring in New Jersey, I'm struck by how much is former farmland, and regrown forest. Is that why you have to recreate the streams? Is it because people have flattened their fields and, changed the water flow and drain things?
A lot of those, yes. And we've done like anchoring. A lot of times at the edge of the farm field, we'll do what we call stone armoring or stone anchoring, where you just be basically creating a big pile of boulders at the outflow, so it breaks it up and doesn't start eroding the banks right there. A lot of times we're trying to convert old farm fields into meadows so that there's less runoff from them. But yeah, the farm fields right up to creeks and streams will do horrible things. And usually it's not the erosion. I'd usually be more concerned about the pesticides and everything else draining off those fields into the stream than I would necessarily the erosion factor. but yes, that is something we've come across.
I'm also thinking even our woods are full of, stone walls. It looks like they regrew 30 or 50 or however many years ago. So a lot of our woodland around here looks like it's regrown farmland.
Yep. Most forests I see, with a very few exceptions, are 60, 70, 80 years old. I don't see much around in New Jersey older than that, a couple here and there, but most of the entire country, not just the East Coast, was, there was not a tree to be seen. 100 and 120 years ago, there was nothing. Everything was leveled. There were no trees around whatsoever. And, this is all, pretty young forest. You gotta go to some pretty special spots to find forests on the East Coast.
And one other question on the biodiversity side, as you're bringing back the plants, and I don't know how hard it is to source riparian plants, how you do that, but as you're bringing that back, how long does it take to see kind of the invertebrates and different kinds of wildlife and things?
Sometimes long at all. Some of these, this rain garden, this backyard, we were working there for 2 months. And as soon as it filled in the first time, we had frogs mating in those little rain gardens, those little pools. And there were green frogs mating in the stream within a week or two of us creating it. The turtles and the salamanders and that stuff, it's hard to tell because I don't always get back to these sites as often as I'd like to. But frogs are the first things. I see green frogs and toads. Anywhere we've created open water, I see green frogs and toads immediately in some of these areas. Yeah.
That's great.
What I was, I just had a thought and it just flew out of my head there. That's all right.
Well, if it comes back, let us know.
Oh yeah, sorry. You asked about species too. So kind of something we do a little bit different than other places. I don't want to say we don't use cultivars here. We pretty much use natives. Every one of our landscapes, whether it's a residential landscape, commercial landscape, or restoration stuff, we are, I don't want to say 100% native because I don't think there's many people that are. There's the odd Norway spruce and other things that we'll use, a lilac in an old farmhouse. There's a handful of non-native plants we use, obviously nothing invasive. We do tend to try to stick to straight species. There is the oddball cultivar on and off here or there, but I have nurseries that grow straight species, Bucks County, Hunterdon County collected material. And that's really what we're trying to use in most cases. As far as trees and shrubs go, a little bit more difficult, but you can find Pinelands Nursery does a great job at it. There's also some bigger nurseries here in Bucks County that at least they're growing straight species that have been grown in Bucks County their whole life. And we do our darndest I don't source trees from north, south, east, west. We try to keep our plant sourcing is probably within 150 miles of where we're located here. And we don't stray too far away from that. So as far as genetic diversity goes, we try to use straight species in most of our jobs. I would say one of the jobs I was most proud of was in the borough of Doylestown, residential, I don't want to say typical because nothing we do is typical, but a residential garden design, roughly 6 different trees, maybe 10, 12 different varieties of shrubs, and probably 70 or 80 different types of perennials in this job. Out of all those plants, let's call it 70 to 80 species used. There was only 4 cultivars used in that entire project. And this was a residential homeowner site in downtown Doylestown. And I walked away from that job that day pretty proud that we were able to get that many true native local diversity plants into that garden there, and not many other people care about that, but we try as best we can. Not 100, you can't do it 100, difficult to do 100%, but it's the better you can have. The animals like those straight species better than the cultivars. There's no questions at it. People can debate it all they want. I don't care what anybody says. Animals are animals that grew up in the Northeast with our native Northeast plants, local genetics. That's what they want. I don't care what anybody says about cultivars. Yes, they use them. No, they can't be as good. That's my 2 cents on that.
Well, you'll be glad to hear that we're very much trying to stick with that principle with our forest restoration. So, so I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm going to give the last question, interestingly enough, to my husband, but I'm going to ask him to explain himself because I'm not sure if he's talking about your project where you were trying to get the streams to curve again. But he asks, why didn't you just remove the tree instead of routing the stream around it? Eric, which tree are you talking about?
The simple question to that is it was too big and too heavy to pull out with the equipment we had there. And it just gave us a perfect opportunity to dig the stream in a different direction. You know, the tree had already blocked the straight shot of the waterway. So it just gave us, the water was already going behind it. We just exaggerated it.
Right, you guys just like to play with heavy equipment.
That's small equipment, but yes.
All right, well, that is going to be our last question. I have to say, once again, Emile DeVito's advice did not disappoint, and Mike, you certainly did not disappoint. That was wonderful and interesting, and had lots of things in it that I think are pointers and things to think about for us. And I see one of our new board members is saying a great presentation in the chat room, and I have to agree.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It was great. Thank you. And thanks to all our members and all our board members who have been on this call and in the meeting. And we'll look forward to our next meeting. So many more thank yous showing up in the chat, Mike. And with that, I think we will end the meeting. And I'll let Anna Reed do that because she's our tech master today.